And it's spinning, and ideally we don't wreck your world. Yes, looks like we're still live. Perfect. Hello everyone, and welcome. All right, dude, how's your day going? I've been enjoying watching you play some Vampire Survivors, man. What do you think about that game?
It's been just kind of a nice variety Monday. Just a chance to kind of hang out and play things that I have in my library I don't normally get to play some MMOs that I have just like goals in that just need to get chipped away at. I did some Destiny Pinnacle Gear grinding this morning. I was going to try to knock out my WoW monthly trading post, but the game's in maintenance.
Well, and 14's in maintenance right now because they're upgrading the servers, right? Like a 24-hour or something like that, or I saw something about that on its way.
Yeah, I knew that was coming up, so it just felt like a good day to go do other stuff. And like Vampire Survivors has been in my backlog. It's just been one of those games I bought it because it looked like something I would like, and I try not to do that, not to buy things like until I'm ready to play them. But it looked really great, and it's like, well, where would you get the time? The moment you get into it and people were like, well, what you want to do is you want to be able to survive 30 minutes at a time. It's like, who has 30 minutes? That's a long time for like a single level of a roguelite game. If you're wondering where the time comes from, it's not a long time if you want to play it. You're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get all that done in just 30 minutes?
Yeah.
So, there's a reason that things like Final Fantasy's deep dungeon system don't restrict you to just 30 minutes. It's nice to have these games take a long time. And I've lost hours and hours in roguelites, but it is why some people like uninstall them. They're like, I realized I wasn't getting anything else done in my life because I was like, oh, I'll just sit down and play one level. And then like at 28 minutes, they die. And they're like, well, I mean, I should play until I complete a level.
Yeah. Just a little bit more.
5.5 hours later. But yeah, I don't know if Final Fantasy in maintenance today.
No, they got chat confirms. Yeah, Pride is says that maintenance actually is on April the 3rd. I just saw a tweet about it. I was like, oh, great. That makes sense. I remember they were working on upgrading those servers themselves. And I was like, is that because that would be makes sense to do it on a Monday, And then so in my mind, I didn't see the date. I just kind of was like, oh, I guess. And then I pop on and you're playing Destiny. And then I was like, oh, yeah, I guess. Okay.
Like, I was planning on playing WoW.
Next out. Yeah.
That's what I was like. I wanted to play WoW, but the WoW monthly thing takes like 2 hours. And so it's like, well, I have a lot more time than that. So what else can we do?
Yeah.
Just kind of make it a variety day. So I'll do the WoW stuff as part of the day. That's the primary task of the day. But I have a much longer stream, so we don't have to stay on task.
What's going on with your Destiny progress? Like, where are you at? How you feel now that you've kind of beat the game, you're working on Strand? Like, what do you have big goals, or have you already started to kind of feel that like I've done the thing, and are you feeling pulled away yet?
So I'd like to make it to like 1800. I think that's like a nice casual goal. I'm at 1777.
Mm-hmm.
So I would need to kind of chip away at my weeklies in at least a couple categories each week.
Yeah.
It would need to be that big of a deal. So I'd like to see a little bit more of just kind of what the daily reset is, that kind of daily and weekly feel. That's what kind of helps me understand where the fatigue comes from when I hear players are happy or unhappy. Like, I really just want to be able to better empathize with people who are invested in games that aren't the same games I'm invested in. Mm-hmm. So if there's people playing Destiny 2 and they're like, oh, I just can't do this anymore, I kind of want to know what that feels like. And so going and getting some Pinnacle, just so I can understand. Like, I got 2 cloaks today. I got a 1774 and a 1776. Which is a real bummer. Like, that's a real bummer. And it's kind of like in World of Warcraft getting your vault and getting the wrong piece. And there's really not an equivalent in Final Fantasy that feels quite that bad.
Yeah.
That I've run into yet, because I'm not full clearing a Savage tier each week. So I assume that it's similar to having your Savage be like, you don't get a drop that you need, because I've definitely done raiding where that's the case. So I don't know if that's the same thing, but I want to kind of better understand what people are talking about when they talk about a system that's over monetized or is over grindy or is too casual centric or whatever the complaint may be. There's so many different kind of MMO complaints that all ultimately dumb down to a well-intentioned system was not balanced correctly. So the question is, well, then how does that balance need to be adjusted? Because I'm a pretty casual player. And so a lot of times it can be very easy for me to accidentally dismiss people who invest a lot heavier into these systems than me. So trying to get better at it.
There you go. The Fido confirms that I actually do have Vampire Survivors in Steam because I was gifted that and I saw that pop in. So I don't know if that was you, Fido, that gifted that to me. Thank you. I haven't sat down and played it yet. In fact, I beat Forspoken. I really like the game.
Very different games.
Yeah, very different games. Well, and then it's like I love this kind of style, so I'm gonna have to see if I can get if that. I'm assuming it probably runs well on Steam Deck, as a kickback and like play that a little bit. There's like when you just kind of look at the big backlog of games that you ultimately have, it ends up being somewhere it's like, yeah, I'd love to, get into more. I've been sitting down trying to decide between playing Hogwarts and playing Final Fantasy VII R, and with Final Fantasy 16 just here in a couple of months, I'm thinking I'm going to go with 7R.
So 7R and Hogwarts S2, those seem like different games as well. And the one
RPG
thing
in my library
pissed the community off. So like differently.
It's 2023.
Like they're drastically different games.
It's 2023. What game release doesn't piss off some part of insert
Not
whatever community? Hey, we released Vampire Survivors, and freaking goths are like,
nobody's mad at Vampire Survivors. It's a universally
I can find somebody.
Game.
This is the
internet, only
man.
Feelings that are out there that are not positive are people who don't know about it and they watch it for 5 minutes and go, I'm gonna buy that game. I'm gonna buy that game.
I'm gonna buy that game. Yum, yum, yum. Then also Pride Izzy says, WoW equals official post that the servers will be down 20 minutes ago. Sorry, not sorry. 14 official posts. Servers will go down in 4 months, 3 weeks, 2 days for 1 hour and 56 minutes. We are so sorry. It feels like that way. I don't know if somebody just ran up behind me, but my door just flew open. We were talking about Vampire Survivors. Turns out I have a ghost. All right, we'll see. We'll see if that stays. Closed. All right, welcome in everybody. Smash that like button if you're on the YouTube side of things. That's a great way of helping these videos out. Feel free to chat as well. Today we've got a lot that we want to talk about. Two main topics. I'd like to give you guys my Diablo 4 impressions. I got to play actually quite a bit this weekend. No druid yet. We only had 3 choices for the classes. This coming
in a second.
Yeah, that comes this weekend. Controller support. I just actually posted a controller guide. Not shocking. Over on Ginger Prime, I can tell you hands down, I love playing on PC with controller. I think they did a phenomenal job. There'd be a couple of additional changes that I'd prefer that they kind of like address in the future, but like at its core, it was definitely a good time. So I'm going to talk to you guys today about kind of my impressions having played Diablo 4 this weekend, and then coming from, which was interesting because I did feel like you can feel when we played it last time to here, obviously, like some directional changes and differences. If you guys comment in chat, I will be able to highlight it, whether you're on Twitch or over here on the YouTube side of things. We got that figured out, so we're excited and ready to rock and roll. But first, I want to talk to Chris about New World. There is essentially a lot of changes on the way, and last week alone, the devs gave me the biggest glimmer of hope. I put up a big old forum post. I talked about it, generated a lot of interest, used my influencer weight to lean in and just say, guys, if you agree with anything I'm sharing, just go and interact with the post. The devs have responded. And on the PTR, they pushed out this change that makes me excited. My core complaint with the seasonal model that New World was rolling out isn't that they have a seasonal model, isn't the ways that you gain seasonal experience, is that they were taking away options for me as a player in terms of that. If you go fish, for example, and you don't have anything on your activity card that relates to fishing, you're not making seasonal progress. And I said that they need some passive experience. And I just kind of used the arbitrary one seasonal experience per whatever action you're doing, crafting, gathering, doesn't matter. 1 second. Got a baby crying. I'm gonna make sure it's okay.
We were talking about seasonal models earlier this morning and what's a fair seasonal model. I think for me at this point, it's like I don't mind the act of purchasing something being very FOMO based. That is just a natural marketing term. Like I don't like. It's hard to say. Well, just don't use FOMO. I don't mind. I don't mind that they use FOMO in the purchasing element, but I don't think that the seasonal model needs to be FOMO in the completion element. I think if you purchase season 1 and season 2 starts and you want to finish season 1, knock yourselves out. If you want to go work on season 2 for a bit because you purchased it as well, and then you want to go back and do season 1, that's fine too.
That would be the preferred method, especially for
and like,
MMOs. And I think they could even seed into the current season, like something that's exclusive if you're on that season, right? Like I think you could say,
I think the base thing is you just vault the act of purchasing the seasons.
Mm.
So it's like, so there's 2 days left in season 1. It's like, you should buy it, or
Just buy
you
it
don't
now.
know when you'll get a chance to purchase, season of the hawk again, and this is the only chance to get that. And so
gotta get that hawk season.
So I don't know. I think there can be a FOMO element to it. And I think seasonal events themselves, like the little Christmas holidays and stuff like that, are a great chance to go introduce unique cosmetics and all of that. I don't like that Final Fantasy then goes and puts those on the store. That makes it feel like it's unique except. Like either make it unique or don't. So if you want to put a different skin in each year or something like that. The really cool thing is if, say, this year's blue and next year's red, well, people who have been there every year can have them all, but then new players just let them choose between blue and red. And so like the advantage of being there every year is they keep adding them and you can keep acquiring them. But at the end of each year's event, you get to pick one. Like I think there's a lot of opportunities to kind of reuse assets, which is where MMOs can thrive. The question is, how do you use enough of your assets? Because they're very expensive to build. So how do you not just get utterly screwed when you have a bad patch cycle, or we all decide to stay inside and overconsume your game for 6 months? Like how do you better leverage the fact that you've been around 10 years? It's weird to me that games that have been around 10 years don't have some like distinct advantage over games that are 2 years old all the time. They do sometimes, but like you should be playing that all the time. Like if you've ever played poker with somebody who gets chip lead, like they're a bully every hand after that. I know Brian is. Like if Brian gets ahead, he will be a bully all the time. Like, it doesn't make sense to me that that MMOs are not being content bullies when like it's like I have 200 million hours of content. Like what do you have? Like just constantly throw it in the newer game's face. So as New World starts to embark on this seasonal model, my question is, how are they going to use that not just for this season, but how are they going to use that when this season's 5 years old? 7 years old.
The only way to, unfortunately, the only way that we can answer that, and that's actually one of the things I feel like within the community, New World continues to kind of try to establish that pattern, is we don't know because we actually haven't seen it. That's where like Final Fantasy XIV, where people will be frustrated at it because of its predictability, because it's so consistent that you have a spreadsheet that literally breaks it down by day, almost to the hour, that when the information's coming out. But in the New World's case, like we know we're getting an expansion this fall, but we don't know. Does that mean now we're going to have an expansion every year, or are they going to go every 2 years? Like, what does that cycle look like? We do have seen a pattern with their seasonal events. And that's one of the things, like you brought up Final Fantasy XIV. I think it's an interesting compare and contrast option, because I always felt like they were putting those seasonal event items in the store to pad things in the store, because when the store first came out, there really wasn't many things that they had, and it was like, well, what? And then at the same time, what else can we sell? But also not at the same time, not making it so that the best or the coolest or the weirdest, glams are only in the store. There is that's my thing with the stores. Like, is there a way to earn them in game? And that becomes a real challenge really quick for a lot of gamers, because as soon as you put a time to cost conversion, everybody does the math instantly and says, I could go deliver pizzas for an hour and buy 10 of those, right? And you want me to spend 300 hours grinding towards it? Like, as soon as you get that conversion in your head, you start feeling like your time is not being respected. And that's when you see the YouTube videos that are all popping off like, finally a game that respects your time? Anyway, that's a whole other rant for another day. But its core, like with New World, like with the season, like I think there's still I think this is really a good opportunity for the devs and the community to have that kind of dialogue, because right now they have said that the season does go away. And same thing with Destiny. It's like, when I want to play in the last 2 weeks before the new season, it's so weird. You're in this awkward space because you kind of I feel always disincentivized to try and log in and grind. Now they say they're putting in about 40 to 50 hours worth of gameplay grind, as a part of the season pass. So a lot of people start chalking that up, that it's like, oh, it's nothing. It's a big, like, you could knock that out pretty quickly. And yes, somebody already did on the PTR. They knocked it out like in a day. Like, it's not like impossible. Way to go, 5 head. Maybe it was a day, maybe it was 2. I don't know the the exact time frame, but it isn't essentially a massive commitment of your time to be able to knock out the season pass. Cool idea, but it's the passive experience. And so what the devs have changed based off of the feedback, and there's still work to be done, but the feedback is for every 10,000 player experience that you get post level 60, you get 25 seasonal experience. And I personally, that leads into the idea of the player aptitude levels. As you hit level 200, like on crafting and gathering, you enter into the aptitude system in which you keep getting experience. And it just says, thank you. Thank you for continuing to gather and to craft.
It doesn't do anything really, though, right?
It doesn't do anything. But that's what we've been advocating for in this case for the player level as well, because experience at 60 hits the floor just like it does in 14. It's the same feedback that I had for 14. Like,
but it's not like Destiny where like that +1 makes you more powerful for the duration of that season. It's literally nothing.
Right. It's literally nothing. Okay. It's a reward crate of materials, you know, and a kind of a bragging rights thing by your little level thing or something like that. Hey, I've done this an insane amount, you know, like maybe I know what I'm talking about, or maybe I'm just weird. But in terms of seasonal XP,
I probably don't know about the other games you're playing.
Yeah, it's like in terms of the seasonal experience, though, like to kind of bring this, you know, together and connect it, is there's no visual way to track it right now. Like it's like, oh, every 10,000 experience, you just kind of have to have that happen to know that you then got the additional 25. So this is still on the PTR. I don't think that's going to make it in time for the release on the 28th, being that we're this close. They're wrapping up the sprints. They're testing it out. It's getting ready to roll out. That's one of the things that within games as a service games, I see a lot of non-developers pop off. They're like, I gave feedback, you know, a month ago. And I'm like, oh man, that's great. Like there's a process that feedback goes through and then eventually gets put on a backlog in a sprint. There's no guarantee that that feedback is going to be targeted based off of this release. That's why it's like
those community members have to go through those and then distill them down and try to, you know, put them all into categories and then present those. And then they go over those. And even if they're like, wow, everything the community suggested is great. And everybody in the community all asked for exactly the same thing and nobody disagreed. So we are going to be able to satisfy everybody because they're all good ideas and they all agree with each other. Well, even then, they still have to prioritize, okay, in what order do we tackle those things? Meanwhile, new feedback's still coming in. Like, that's a hard job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is absolutely a hard job. And on that note, like in terms of it, like you have that cycle. You got like there's a cost to it. Like, okay, does this conflict with any other systems? Does this conflict with anything we're also already working on? And so that's why, like, there was the first Descendant. There was a beta for this game as a looter shooter. They had a beta for it in October of last year, and people were kind of dogging on it. They're like, "Oh man, you know, the questing system's kind of weak," because I think a lot of gamers have been trained up that betas are kind of these glorified like marketing demos because that's what a lot of PR companies have done. They've treated these early access betas as like marketing.
Fortnite might still be in beta. Like,
who knows? Who knows with Fortnite? We'll officially come out of beta when we make $3 billion this year, and then we get sued for $500 million over here. What's this $500 million like fines and lawsuits to our $3 billion, like our $3 billion?
Why are they suing betas?
Yeah, we had the label, guys.
It was not even a completed game.
And so with that, like that gives them time. Like they didn't have that with a release date. We don't even still have a release date for that game. That gives them time to take in that feedback and telemetry and actually make changes, right? So that's one of the things that I think will be interesting to see. So I would expect to see some of the changes that we're talking about suggested. So like I put up a thread. I created some art assets regarding like aptitude level and tracking of the player experience, which I generally found like a lot of people very receptive to. And that's something that I would personally enjoy. Guild Wars has it, you know, that's usually kind of my default go-to is like, hey, Guild Wars does this really cool thing with this system. Maybe can New World have a version of this? This would be really nice.
That's why Guild Wars is smaller. It's only played by devs. It's the inspiration to all the other games.
And nobody else is playing, and all devs are like, dang, these guys have some great ideas.
It's so good. I can't wait until it makes it into other games. And then it's like, well, why don't we just play Guild Wars then? I don't know. I don't have a good reason. It's so good. It's so good.
Now, Solid 912 chimes in, says, they say that the season is a way to deliver content quicker, but in reality, yes, it's getting quicker, but it's not chunky. If you compare it to WoW ESO 14, in their first few years, they all changed very, very rapidly. What do you think, Chris?
I mean, that's been my biggest point with A, the games that have not come out, but B, with New World. Like when I said, like, we don't know that it's not a vertical progression game, they're like, yes, we do. And I'm like, no, we don't. Like, it is very much a move fast and break things mentality in MMOs. Like, who cares? Why stick to any assumptions that you made from before the game came out? Like, you made a whole bunch of assumptions in the initial round of content, and you got a lot of feedback. And a lot of that feedback is to implement it, you're going to have to break things from before the game came out. Yeah. Do it. Like, do not limit yourself 10 years from now because you're not willing to make a change 6 months in based on some idea that was set around a coffee table, like before the game even had funding. Like that, it doesn't make any sense, as opposed to when you're 10 years in, a lot of times you have so many systems built off of that decision that you're going to break all kinds of things to change it. And so at that point, it makes absolute sense to be like, well, I would love to make that change, but I'm not willing to give up the 67 things to do it. I'm not willing to break things that I don't even know what it's going to break. Like, so you have to get more cautious as you go. The interview with the Riot MMO, he kind of talked about how, like, you know, do you guys see yourself adding a class every season, or it was something along that lines. Do you see yourself adding a new way to play? Do you think games should do this? And he kind of said, well, when a game first comes out, add a lot of new classes. After you have like 50 classes in the game, maybe you don't need to keep adding new classes. That causes more problems than it does solutions. So just games are at just different points in their life cycle. And I think New World's still very early on. So if they want to add new weapons, if they want to consider just turning things on their head, go nuts. Worst case, you just undo it, right? Just like this. Just kidding. That was just a season 1 thing. Season 2, that's going back the way it was. Yeah. I'm sorry.
There's going to be a question regarding, I guess, that content loop, because what we're seeing and this is all going to vary depending on, you know, that kind of game. That's where like that vertical progression, like 100% vertical progression, that narrative driven experience, like has those hard stops, which there's a value to the player in that regards. If you know when you can return, if it's not hard to return, sure, it's easier to step into this game and not feel like, okay, I took it. Like, you don't feel punished for taking a break. Final Fantasy XIV has really kind of set that mold. And Final Fantasy XIV, even though they don't call it seasons, has established a very predictable pattern, which players can then choose to when they want to play and when they want to dip out. Generally speaking, the next patch is usually when you start to see more and more players returning in preparation for the next expansion. And that all starts kind of a whole new cycle. And then you have players kind of who choose to dip in and dip out at various points, kind of along the seasonal or dotted path that they have with updates. And I don't think New World is any exception. Final Fantasy XIV has a bigger content offering with a 2-year cycle, where if you see something like maybe ESO or even Destiny, like when you think about the campaign, if you were only playing Destiny 2 for its campaign, then you got your offering and then you kind of dip out, right? And so you could end up playing Destiny for roughly 20, 30 hours a year, you know, based off of that's offering alone. And maybe that is enough, maybe that's not. It's going to be up to each individual player. What I think the season model actually offers, it's that hype season within, you know, the overall whatever the expansion is, because we actually have technically 2 seasons in New World before the expansion. And so I don't think season 1 is going to be this massive wave of returning players. I don't think you're going to see massive numbers of players who are like, oh, this fixed every issue or every piece of content that I found lacking. But I think season 2 will build up because it will learn lessons from season 1. And then season 2 will lead into the expansion. So you're going to have that pre-expansion hype that will be a much more interesting time for the game. Roughly probably around August would be my guess, is that when you start to see that build up, as long as the New World devs don't shoot themselves in the foot and come out and be like, whoops, we actually deleted every character out there. Sorry about that, everybody. Get fresh start servers, anybody? You know, something like that would, I think, would the only thing that would kind of kill that momentum. And then even with the expansion, the content will be consumed. Players will, you know, dip out just like they normally do. And that season in and of itself, with that predictability, is going to be more like a, you know, every quarter, every 3 months, the game is just going to say, hey, if you don't have anything else fun that you're doing, maybe come and check us out and see what we have going on over here. And that's the question that I really want to ask Chris. Do you think we'll see New World after this year? I guess the expansion will probably give us more information than anything.
Sure.
Do you think the expansion after this year we'll see a yearly expansion, or do you think they're going to do kind of an every 2 years? Because technically the game will officially celebrate its second year in operation this fall.
I think that has a lot to do with how this one's. We don't have a price on it yet, do we?
No. I'm gonna guess
I think that has a lot to do with
yeah.
price. I think if we see it at $30 or $40, that tells me it's probably going to be annual. Because as a gamer, we're suddenly expected to be a lot more sophisticated lately in kind of calculating how much content do we expect and what does the marketing terms for that mean? Because like Diablo's not cheap. Call of Duty's not cheap. So as games go up in price, suddenly like now I have to gauge the value. So I assume that the best way for them to tell me that would be in the price tag. If it's $60 and it's annual, I think there's going to be some frustration. $60 feels like the unspoken way to tell me that it is 2 years of content. And $40 or less tells me that it is meant to be something shorter than that. Because seeing people spend $90 on Diablo feels crazy.
Yeah.
But that's just old school. Back in my day, I could pick up DLC and an ice cream cone for a quarter. So like I'm just like that's my own bias there. Like I'm not saying $90 is not like I'm not saying it's not crazy. I think there's a lot of people out there that when you start to have kids and student loans and all that, and you start to talk about $100 a day doesn't seem like a lot of income when you have people that are making $10 and $15 an hour. It's like that's a full work day. So $100 just doesn't go as far as it did. So the devs are going to want that $100 too, for all the same reasons that I would want $100. Like there was a time when a $20 bill meant more than it does now. And I feel like a $20 bill now, I shouldn't even be allowed in the grocery store. You can't afford anything. Everything's gotten expensive. So games got expensive too. And so all of that to say, like, I think their pricing model will tell me what they intend for it to be. How much do they intend to tie to the seasonal model, and how much do they intend to tie to these, like, what does the word expansion mean to them?
I could see with their expansion in terms of that, because you're right. Like, what does it mean to them? We'll know more, I'm assuming, this summer and then leading into it. I'm assuming that they're not going to price an expansion higher than their current box price.
What is base price of Diablo, by the way? Fundamental
price,
bottom
$70
price.
Is the lowest Diablo
so it's not
price
60
you get.
Anymore.
No games are 60 anymore.
No games are 60 anymore. Call of Duty was 75, I think.
Some Nintendo games might still be 60, but Zelda's 70. And then you'll see that shift is just going to become the norm.
And did 70 get you early access? Just so I'm saying that correctly.
No, it doesn't.
The $90.
Well, no. So getting the $70 would get you access to this past weekend.
Okay.
The only thing that gets you actually faster start access.
My brother said that he was only going to hop in if he could do the $90, and
it's the 90 and 100.
And so, like, why does he feel pressure for 90? To just derail here for a second.
Because you get started for 4 days plus.
Okay, because he told me, he's like, I want to do the 90 or nothing at all, and I just took that as like, okay, why? Okay, thank you.
So we're talking about, there's multiple versions. So I see chat saying, why do you keep saying 90? The base price is 70. Then they have the collector's edition, which is 90, and that gives you 4 days early access amount, etc. Then there's the ultimate edition for 100. And then that extra $10 gets you like another remote and gets you like some 20 levels on the battle pass or something like that. And they say battle pass is cosmetic, but that's also, it's the internet. It's got people up in arms, not shocker. So that's kind of how that breaks down. New World, for its base price, is 40 right now. It's actually on sale for 50% off, so you can get New World for $20. They also have other editions that have like bundled like cosmetics and stuff in them, so those are all discounted at 50% up until March the 23rd. So if you guys are watching this in real time and you were like, you know what, Brian makes a compelling case for New World, I'll finally try it out. Now's the time to purchase it because it's going to be discounted. But in terms of the expansion price, I would say that they don't come in higher than the base price. So you're looking at either a $30 or $40 expansion. Then I would say they probably have a bundle for 60 or a collector's edition. We'll see that stuff where it's like, hey, here's all this extra stuff. But I could see them actually selling you the expansion like Destiny does and all of the seasons therein. if they do that, that will tell us whether New World is shifting to a yearly expansion model or an every other year expansion model.
That's a fair
because if they're like comes with 8 season pass tokens things, oh, they're going to go every 2 years. I personally think it's interesting in terms of the yearly. Like, I don't think New World, has as broad of a reach as something like Destiny. A shooter is going to be more appealing than a medieval or, Age of Conquest, MMORPG. But it's going to be interesting because ESO also has that yearly expansion model. And that just kind of allows people to kind of set their clock to it. They know that even if a certain season doesn't resonate with them, that there is a big chunk of content that is on the way. That, okay, yeah, well, this is just to kind of keep the players who are really, really engaged, and ultimately just having kind of a news touch point that people could talk about once a quarter of what's going on, what's in the game. Should you return? Standard YouTube fare, like it's the standard YouTube stuff that you generally see, because those are the questions that you'll see pop up on Reddit. Hey, should I return? I've been on a break. What's new? What's all changed? And that just adds into the overall kind of zeitgeist of everything that's kind of flowing around in the game itself. So I think probably by this summer, if not, August or September, we'll have a much clearer picture of that. But this kind of leads to another kind of topic I'd like to kind of get Chris's thoughts on here. The new world killer is a term that continues to pop up more and more and more. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, but it's not meant in the same way that it is meant for World of Warcraft. So we've actually seen the term WoW killer like completely drop off the face of the earth. Because then essentially, if anybody mentions it, the reply is only WoW. WoW's the true WoW killer. Like that, they're the only ones who are going to do that. And then some people chime in with, oh, now it's Final Fantasy 14 killer is the term. I actually haven't seen 14 killer only unless it's in a reply. New World Killer is the new term that people keep labeling new MMOs. Ashes of Creation has now been called a New World Killer. PAX Day, New World Killer. Blue Protocol, interestingly enough, New World Killer.
Where are you seeing this? Like on New World comments
Reddits, MMO subreddits and stuff like that. And
I also hear the world's dead. So like, how can you kill that which has no life?
It's a conundrum. And so the context of what it's meant by players in this case is that they're using New World kind of as a waiting room. Like, okay, all right, like I'm not necessarily happy with this game. I'm waiting for the next thing to come and actually take me away from this. So it's almost, it felt like there's a little bit of a hostage situation where it's like, yeah, I don't like the other stuff that's out there. I'm not playing this game or that game that already exists that I could go play today. So I'm choosing to spend my time in New World, root for its demise while I wait for Throne of Liberty, Blue Protocol, PAX Day, Ashes of Creation, insert whatever other MMO that is out there. And so I've seen this also in a lot of terms of like every announcement now. So I just found that was amusing because obviously a different context of definition, but how that is now becoming a term that I see more and more and more that people are listing on it. So what do you think about that? Do you have any thoughts on that phrase?
I mean, there is an idea that our attention is zero sum, that like we can only play so many games at one time. And so when you talk about these games that want 100 hours a month or 200 hours a month or whatever, like there can only be so many of those. But like over and over, we've heard subscription fatigue and we've heard all these things. And yet like Netflix is still around, so like New World's still around, World of Warcraft's still around. So I think if you want to see something hit like the record for like the most subscribed to game, then yes, maybe we need there to be killers. But if you just want healthy communities that are having fun and come and go based on when it's fun, that's fine. Like then it doesn't matter. There doesn't need to be these killers. So I think it depends on the conversation.
So what's a healthy community then? Like what do you feel like, if just as an outsider looking in at any particular game, like let's say, especially if you're on the hunt for a new game and we weren't talking about MMOs, you're like, you know what, Brian, it's been a while, I'm kind of looking to kind of step into something a little bit different, a little bit fresh. What are you looking at in terms of population? Because population does mean something to a collection of people, right? You don't want to sit here and invest in time if you feel like everybody's just vacating a game. So what does that look like for you? Is there any red flags that you look at or you look for?
I think that devs that are seemingly proud of what they're doing and able to like maintain a stable dev environment where they're coming out with consistent content and they like can keep some of their employees, I think is a good indication on that side. And then a community that is both welcoming to new players and celebrating veteran players. You can't be bleeding your veteran players out. That's alarming and it's a sign that something's really unhealthy. But a community that's so good at taking care of its own that nobody else is welcome and they're like, get out of here, noob. That's also problematic.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you can have a healthy dev environment and a healthy community environment, that's where we just go around and around. And now it's just a question of, is there enough money exchanging between those that both sides feel that they're getting their value? Right? Are the devs able to spend that money in a way that makes the community feel worth giving them money? And is the community giving them enough money that they can keep doing what they're doing? But as long as everybody's satisfied, that's it. That's the whole recipe. And it doesn't matter how big it is. And so if that's 5,000 players and 2 devs, and then that's it, that's fine. Like that's a perfectly healthy game. You know, we talk about these games that have like hundreds of employees and millions of players, but it doesn't have to be that.
Well, and that's one of the things that has been, I guess, a bane or a drain on MMOs as a genre, because a lot of people, whether they're like actively engaged, but a lot of the dialect that I end up seeing posted on like Reddit and in the comment sections is like, oh, it didn't do what WoW did. Like it's, you know, and which for me, the only game that's really done what WoW has done is Fortnite. It's not even within the same genre, like that comes out and that just becomes this cultural revolution and phenomenon. And so for me, for the longest time, even Final Fantasy XIV, like it felt like people were beating that over with a stick because it wasn't big enough. It wasn't dominating enough. And now that it has grown and has achieved like that level of success, that it is a household name, people know about it, you know, that it ends up being like, okay, like that, if that's what you're talking about, you're also talking about a 10-year grind that these games then have to like continue to put out quality content and hope that people who are already doing the same thing mess up or something like that.
So how does that work with TV shows, right? So like if it 10 seasons you get syndication, then there is this argument. There's a lot of people, myself included, that won't watch a television show in its first season because the season's not long enough. And so then it's like, okay, well, I'll just watch it once they have a couple. But if we all do that,
then there's no season
then
2.
Don't they drop it because they're like, well,
nobody's interested.
Nobody's interested. So like, how these games? So if we can look at these games once they're 10 years old and know that some of what they're doing is valid or some of what they're doing is not valid, like how does that work when they're less than 10 years old? Like if we ignore every game that's less than 10, then they don't get the feedback necessary to like give them a fair rating at the decade mark.
Yeah, it's a real big problem within MMOs, and especially because you're also now talking about kind of a business model shift that has occurred within that. We were talking about Diablo pricing earlier, but when you look at also like what pricing models that are generally easy to get people involved in, it's nothing that everybody who's a veteran is like, yeah, let's go with that model because we love it. The free to play, pay to win model, baby. Like it ends up being like this mindset. And with there's so many different business models and shifting away from the subscription, which has acted as a wall. And for the longest time, I liked the subscription model because it made everybody on the same page. Like everybody's here. We've all paid, you know, to get into the club, you know, we all have skin in the game. I think it's the fairest model. But then you look at like games, just there's not 5 different subscription MMOs out there that are dominating kind of that space. Everything is kind of shifted generationally into that free to play, or my hope is the buy to play, like, you know, Guild Wars 2. I think they were way ahead of their time. Again, like we said earlier, like it's the ultimate dev MMORPG. Like the devs are like,
if you want to work on MMOs, you should be playing Guild Wars 2.
Yeah, that's what you need to study, hands down.
I would argue everybody else should too, but let's start with the devs.
And then like Blue Bergen says, track record plays a major role here too. I will never play an Amazon game out of the box because they have really a bad track record. And I think that the question or the pushback that I would have is that how so? Like what constitutes a bad track record? If they abandoned New World, I would agree with you, but they're not EA where they like well, we tried and then shut it down. I know the Crucible was shut down, but I was actually really happy they did that. I felt like that was the right call. I didn't think there was any saving grace that they could try to like eke out with that game. What do you think?
Yeah, I think canceled projects on their own, like for an established studio, are actually a sign that it's healthy. Like that if Square Enix started working on 5 games and 3 of them don't make it to market, that is that they are managing their capital in a way where they're saying, I don't need an idea to make it. If it's not turning out fun, we can quit. We set aside enough money to take X number of projects to this milestone, and then we were only going to let the strong one move on. And that's really cool. Unfortunately, like, they had to do that like right out of the gate. So like it's a little scarier when somebody has it's not like, oh, we're doing it because they know what a good game is. They don't know what any game is. They haven't released anything. So I do think there is like some natural unease with Amazon doing that like really early on. And their counterpoint to that has to be New World. Like it has to be New World. So it's really great that New World's turning out to be healthier and healthier. Because that's what starts to make those old kind of moments fade away. Yeah. The question, and now they're becoming a publisher, and they're turning out to do a decent job at publishing. Like people seem largely happy with the things that they're frustrated about with Lost Ark. Anywhere I see frustrations, they're not on the publisher side of things. So as a publisher, Amazon's proven to be a very, very good publisher.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And yeah, the points that people like to throw at them, they're easy points that you can score online, but then when you like really dive into it, you're like, that actually doesn't really shake itself out. And the only thing that's going to get them out of that mindset that Blue has is just continuing to make games and products. And I think one of the biggest pickups they have is the Tomb Raider series, because if they can deliver a real quality experience with that, they're going to have that baked in nostalgia. They have not had a nostalgia drip at all, especially with New World. That's where I like when New World was set to launch, I was like, this game is going to struggle really hard for a couple years, because there is nothing that players can lean into and just say, oh, I've been playing every single player New World game, since I was a kid. Oh my gosh, we get to explore this and look how amazing this is. Like that is when you look at the MMOs outside of the first generation ones where people were just making up stuff as they go along. World of Warcraft is based off a franchise. Final Fantasy is obviously based off a franchise. Guild Wars is based off a franchise. Like there's all of these things that have that extra connection. And so without that, like New World was always going to struggle no matter what you threw at it. And the other side of it is that people don't yet know Amazon. And I think over the course and going into year 2 this fall, like we're getting a bigger picture. And then now we're seeing them pick up Blue Protocol, Throne and Liberty. Those are going to be some interesting test cases. And right now, like the fear mongering has shifted from hosting and publishing to censorship with Amazon devs, because that they're also picking up these very Korean and Japanese like properties. And so the conversation online right now is very heavily like in this concept of like, oh, censorship. They're censoring this or they're doing this. And everything that I've personally found on that is all related to like, oh, that character is 13 years old in Japan, and they're kind of having a sexualized outfit. They're going to age him up and maybe dress him up a little bit more here in the Western version, which I don't have a problem with. Do you have any issues or concerns with censorship?
That's a big topic.
Yeah.
Might be another that's one a really big topic, because like, to say you don't have an issue with censorship is to say that nothing should ever be learned from or adjusted ever. That nothing that, like, as society moves forward, that we have to live with every past decision for all of time. And we would never, ever, ever say, I shouldn't have said it. I wish I'd said it differently. I know things now that I didn't know then. And I wish I could take it back. Like that's, especially as we talk about remakes, remasters, all these things, bringing things to new markets that they've never been in, to be culturally aware, well, it wasn't a problem when I was a kid. Is that true? Like, are you sure that it's just that the group that was affected wasn't allowed to say anything, or that you just laughed at that group when they complained and now we're going to try respecting them? Like, so censorship on its own, like to say you would never, ever, ever be okay with any form of censorship seems crazy. On the other side of things,
if anybody was like, I'm 100% against all censorship, it's like, I would say we shouldn't teach kids about eugenics. Like, let's let them age up a little bit before we start talking about all our skeletons in the closet.
So I think on the other side of things, to then start saying, corporations are going to start policing speech and all that, and we're going to start seeing like you can't ever tackle any difficult concept in anything, or it needs to, you know, one person, it hurt their feelings. Like, I don't want, you know, there are people that argue like certain subjects shouldn't be talked about until they're age appropriate. And then in some like interviews, when we get on some of these topics that get a little more politically charged, somebody will say like, so could they talk about it with your kid when they're like 17? Like, that's too young. It's like, okay, well then at that point, like if 17 is too young, if 18 is too young, well, they're adults, at least here in the US. Like 17 is adult adjacent, 18, you are an adult in a lot of ways. So if you can't talk about it at 18, when can you talk about it? So at that point, it starts to say, well, then maybe, you know, that's a little over censored, that something can never be talked about ever, ever, ever. It's like, well, you can't talk about it too close to an event that's too traumatic because that hurts the victims. You can't talk about it too far from an event because, dude, it's not even relevant.
Oh, come on.
Oh,
Yeah, we've
so we
already
just
moved
can't talk
on.
about it ever. So like,
Yeah.
when you talk about games censoring these subjects, whether they're changing outfits, whether they're tackling characters from historically underrepresented groups, whether they're changing the way a character talked from 20 years ago, that you're like, that could probably have been done better.
Yeah.
Like there's going to be some of that. The question is, where's the line?
Right.
I think
that's always going to be something.
End, we can see the problems.
That's always going to be the battle. And that's where, like, when I was talking with a couple of people about this specific topic as it relates to Blue Protocol online, I was like, this is the only reason this is bubbling up to the surface in such a fervency, especially on Reddit, is because there's really nothing else to talk about. There's no, like, we're still waiting for news. We're still waiting for these things. And so people are hyper fixating on hypotheticals, right? Like, oh, hypothetically, because they've changed the midriff on this thing, that means they're going to do all these other things. And that's just essentially what is happening. I'm not joking. Like, I wish I was, but I was just like, well, I mean, if they go and over censor the game, I've got a deal for you guys. ExpressVPN, we've teamed up, got a link in the description. You can go play the Japanese version. Like, it's like, if that is the break all point for you, it's not like they're deleting the Japanese version, you know, like that's still going to exist and be an option for players.
But if your argument against something is looking at examples, and then when we reference examples, you start having to pull examples from the future, then I don't know how you're not upset at everything all the time.
Right.
Like let's for now try to focus on like, what have they censored thus far? And to this point, everything that has announced and been announced so far has been bringing a game's content within the rating boards that are regionally appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Like, that just doesn't seem like the hill to die on. Like, if that's where we're going to get upset, then I don't know how we can ever play anything.
I mean, that's the conclusion. I think that if you would live and breathe and on Reddit and online, that ultimately is the conclusion that nobody follows. You know,
like there was a bunch of books that started getting removed here in the United States at the behest of a publisher, like that like the people who are in charge of whether or not, like, they're the ones who make money if it sells. So like, they said, I don't want to sell this in its unmodified state anymore. And people were like, well, if they do that, they're going to go take away every book from our childhood. Based on what? Like, based on what evidence? Like then let's get mad about that when they do that. But that's not what they did. They said, there are some books that are extreme examples. We'd like to change those as the people that own it. So if it's at behest of the game developer, so if the game developer says, hey, can you help me make this regionally appropriate? I've built a game for X region. Can you help me make sure that I'm not going to run into issues as we make this more of a global release? Great. Then Amazon's off the hook. They are doing what the game developer asked for. If, on the other hand, they are taking the most extreme examples and they are only tackling those, then that isn't a reason to get mad. And people argue slippery slope at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But like, you're not slipping yet. Like, it's not like, oh, well, they first did this and then 6 weeks later they did this and then 6 weeks. That's a slippery slope. But a slippery slope's not like the first change. It's like, oh, well, they did 1, so therefore they're going to do 30. I don't know about that. Like, that's a bit of a jump for me.
Sounds like a slow news day.
Which maybe that's what it is. Like, right now, Final Fantasy as a community has been arguing over some really slow news day stuff.
Some chairs, right?
And so, like, maybe that's it. Maybe when we get to the point that the worst thing going on in gaming is that we're not getting to see as many teenage belly buttons as a certain group wants to see, like, great. Then we have solved gaming. Like, if gaming is so good that you're arguing about whether or not you should be able to see teenage cartoon belly buttons, Like things are going great.
That's a life with very little real problems in my mind. Now, before we talk about Diablo, I know we've been teasing it all show. Jim Jones in chat writes this. I'm going to get Chris's opinion. If we have to talk about Diablo, we can push that to another day too. For me, Amazon has the Google reputation. They have this massive graveyard of failed and canceled projects like Blue Sat. Now, this is in reference to a comment that we were talking about earlier. It's hard to wonder, even if they have a success, if they won't screw it up later. Now, when I read this comment, like, I would just be kind of curious. I'm not registering a list of failed like Amazon projects. Yes, they exist, right? Like, you could almost call maybe Twitch a failed project, and then they're trying to generate more revenue. We'll see if that works out for Twitch, but like, I don't equate what Amazon's done to what Google has done. And I think for me, when I see a lot of people like try to hit Amazon and New World, they try to hit them with like mistakes that EA has made and Ubisoft has made and even Google has made. And I'm just like, I haven't seen that kind of pattern within that company. I'd like to see your thoughts. And if Jim wants to weigh in and share any kind of clarification about this graveyard, like I'm not aware of it.
I mean, businesses have graveyards. Any long running business made choices that seemed like a good idea at the time and didn't work out. Right. You run a sandwich shop, you try a new sandwich, it doesn't sell. You take it off the menu. You try another new sandwich, it does sell, it stays on the menu. If you're around long enough, you're going to have a bunch of people that said, I remember when they tried this one sandwich this one summer, it was so good. I'm bummed that didn't make it. Like that's fine. Google has a reputation for like selling tacos at their sandwich shop and saying like, now we're a taco shop, and then getting rid of the tacos. And you're like, I don't even know who you are anymore. So like, it's really hard to keep your finger on the pulse of Google because they have come out with a lot of stuff that were not in their wheelhouse and then canceled those. So that's a little bit different. Amazon is a big, diverse company. So there are parallels between Amazon and Google that make sense.
Yeah.
In that, like, you think of Amazon for their distribution of stuff to your, I ordered something and 30 minutes later it's on my doorstep. That's Amazon. And yet you think of Twitch, that's Amazon. But as far as failed projects, I would say that Amazon is very good at making money on everything they do. They let things have a long life before they cancel them for not making money, but they will eventually cancel them for not making money. That's the one thing that I see them do consistently, but they're willing to lose money to make money. They're willing to lose money to take market share. They're willing to lose money to learn and experiment, but those are always ends like towards the mean, like means towards the ends. So I don't see them as having a list of big, like, failed projects that like were going to be good and they just didn't stay with them. Mm-hmm. They don't have 100% perfect picks, but as soon as something gets legs under it, they seem to take it really far. I mean, Twitch has been given an enormous amount of latitude to try things, and people argue everything Twitch does is for money, but then they ignore. You have to remove all sorts of data from the data set to get to that conclusion. You have to ignore follower modes. You have to ignore all this stuff about making sure that you can not accept hate raids. You have to ignore all this stuff that starts to, like, you have to just remove feature after feature after feature and go, see, all that's left is things that make money. Sure.
Oh, yeah.
So has Amazon done some distasteful things over the years? Yes. Google diapers.com, and you can just be madder today than you were earlier. Like, you can absolutely see areas that Amazon as a company has frustrated people, and they've earned that. But I don't think it's from canceling projects. I think it's from business practices that within the realm of legality have allowed them to like push people who were in business out of business, or push them to the point that Amazon was allowed to buy them for pennies on the dollar. Like, they've been bullies, but I don't think they've been known for canceling projects.
Within the gaming space, they had a couple like announcements that they have canceled, and I think essentially what the lesson that I would say that they have learned from that is to stop announcing projects. It's like, hey, work on the projects, and if it's not coming together, like, don't announce it. That's actually the thing with Riot's MMO. Like, we were talking about Ghostcrawler leaving earlier. Like, we don't know anything about that except that they have an MMO and other multiple genres of games that they're working on as a company.
But if they hadn't talked about it, it wouldn't have been news.
Right. And I think essentially, like, the initial startup is, hey, we're working on all these different games. that in and of itself is what probably leads into Jim's kind of, viewpoint here, where they're coming from canceled projects. And it's like, okay, yeah, those probably, like, they might have sound good on paper. And that's one of the things, like, Riot's MMO is the perfect MMO. It is everybody's, like, you go and you just poll the vast majority of people and they will say Riot's MMO. That could be, that's the one that you know nothing about, because it's perfect in your mind. And so gamers have that mindset. As soon as we start learning about it, it could fall into like, wow, they are really doing everything right. Or it starts to run up against the theoretical MMO that you've built in your head, and that starts a conflict. That's why right now you're seeing so much more drama within the Ashes of Creation community, despite that game still being years and years away. I wish it went, like, I kind of feel like I wish it well. Like, I really want it to be good. Like, everything on paper sounds like that could be a lot of fun, but it's always like everything about Ashes is always followed by a big ass butt, man. And that's just the way it goes right now. Jim, let's see here. Like, he's clarifying some things.
I have no doubt they've canceled games. I have no doubt Square Enix has canceled games. I know for a fact Blizzard has canceled games. Canceling games seems to be par for the course.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, like, are they giving up on projects that don't deserve to be given up on? Right? There was a lot wrong with Anthem before it failed. It's not like it's so I know there were people that like the concept.
Core of good. There was a core of good, and then it was like, okay, they got to work on all this other stuff. It's like, oh, come on, guys, y'all can do it. And then it was like, thanks for the money, because Anthem was like one of the number one selling games. Like, it was a massive profit center for them. I'm assuming that after the 7 years of pre-production development, all that stuff. Now, Jim's clarifying on talking about Lumberyard, how it's been difficult to work with. Yeah, I've definitely heard that as well. What's interesting is they've also gone to Unreal Engine 5. So some of the projects that they haven't started actually talking about are on Unreal Engine 5 that the team there are working on internally. So honestly, at the end of the day, all I ask is you learn and you don't make the same mistakes, right? If the next MMO that they launch is in a state like New World was in at launch, and they didn't like talk to the team and say, hey, what are the pain points that y'all wish that you could go and do differently at this before the start? Like, if they don't do that, then I'm going to actually start to be concerned for Amazon. But I'm not, because that's one of the things that they're doing. Like, that's one of the things I loved about Square Enix's Fan Fest. Every freaking year, like every time you have a problem, that next time, not a problem. We learned, we adapted, we addressed it, we fixed it, and we move forward. And that's essentially what I'm looking at with Amazon. Like, it's like, my
bigger concerns are like, company-wide, Amazon has been very anti-union. They feel that they take good enough care of their employees, and that they don't want their employees to have to introduce a third party in to muck that up. But when you hear the employee side of things, it sounds a little bit different. Yeah. And so my bigger concern is, like, are the devs being treated fairly as we talk about unionization being a growing topic inside gaming? Like, I have concerns for Amazon. If we're just going to sit around and be like, okay, can we think of our 5 biggest concerns for Amazon? Yeah. Sure. Canceling projects is not one of them.
Yeah. And what we will do, being that this has been a fun conversation, lots of low points. And so just to chat, thank y'all so much for weighing in, and kind of like one of the things that we want to do with this Mondays and Tuesdays. We'll move with our Diablo 4 discussion. And if you guys have other topics like in this vein, like, you could sound off in the comments, hit us up on Discord. I try to plan these shows out, and we can have a really good time with it. So thank y'all. I guess as a kind of a final thought here from Blue, in this case, how Anthem it actually hurt, because that for them it felt like the final last nail in the coffin for BioWare. This building off of the struggle with the previous Mass Effect Andromeda, like, I feel you. Like, I really, like, I thought that if they put in the work, they could salvage Anthem. Like, I thought the core of the game in and of itself was good enough that they could put in the effort and make it happen. So I'm still to this day like pissed about that. Like, there was this, here's the fun. I was like, this is fun. I really also wanted something to kind of go and at least push back on Destiny a little bit. Like, yes, it's not a first person, but a third person shared world looter shooter kind of in this sci-fi area that could kind of bounce between the two different games. And obviously I think it was cursed with a Destiny killer. That was a term for Anthem, and that was a curse for that game. And then ultimately, yeah, they didn't know what they wanted. The leadership would, like, there were so many problems that you look in and you go and you just read all the different things from that. And right now, if nothing else, I'm not getting a parallel from Amazon Game Studios. Like every time you're like listening to the devs and talking, and like they have answers, and they sit down at least once. Like they have these like Q&As where they like answer the most like disrespectful and pointed comments. And I respect them for being willing to step into a comment that says, "Are you guys effing morons?" Da, 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 da. And the YouTuber in me goes, and no, like I want Chris for his final thought here, but the YouTuber in me goes, yeah, the more you do that, you might get more salt because people feel like that's how you're going to get the attention.
Yeah,
what do you
I
think?
asked a question respectfully and they never answered it. They only asked you the salty ones. So next time I'm not going to type it respectfully. Or that was really funny when they answered it disrespectfully. So what can I do to make mine more disrespectful?
Yeah.
Instead of asking the opposite version of that question, where it's like, hey, they didn't answer mine. Well, how did you type yours? Well, I used 67 F words in a 82 word question. It's like, well, could you make it shorter? Maybe by trimming all of the foul language? Like, I guess I could. Great. Because that would make everybody's life a little bit better. So yes, I would say that you need to be careful giving too much to people that are trolling, because it starts to break discourse down.
The final thought or final question to you, Chris, and to chat to kind of think about, maybe we'll address this in tomorrow's show. Like, favorite, subscribe, and share, all that good stuff, guys. The Earth Demons pointed out that there are too many games as a service this year. 2023 we're going to talk about Diablo tomorrow. We're going to talk, like, we have Wayfinder, you got Throne of Liberty, Blue Protocol, New World, Final Fantasy. Like, do you feel like there's going to be a massive saturation point, or do you feel like any of these games are going to help bring in new players?
I mean, I think the pie gets a little bigger every time we add new games. It's more total marketing budget. It's more types of games, in case the reason they didn't in is that they looked at 3 of the titles and none of those appealed. And when they now marketing draws them back in and they look at a different 3. So I do think it grows the pie, but there's definitely some cannibalism going on as well.
Yeah, natural, right? Because I can only play so many hours.
And you're going to look at the new ones too. Not just
absolutely. That's the thing that I get I find interesting, is when people like dog on the numbers. Like, oh, I came back and saw like there's not that many people that were playing as last month. It's like, well, yeah, but like, are you also paying attention to the entire gaming like ecosystem? Like, nobody, I think, can just play one game, especially in terms of mass volume players, right? Like today, like I'm playing, this weekend I played Diablo, and I played a little New World on Sunday. We kind of got together and hung out in Discord. So guys, if you're not a part of Discord, get in, hang out. It was a lot of fun. It was such a great, refreshing thing, because Diablo 4 is dark, and it's just like, and it's a good thing that it is. I like that they did that, but there was a huge contrast from going from Diablo back into New World this weekend, and I really appreciated that. But like there is a limit, and the question ends up being is that, yes, that limit's applied to me. So I think of that answer as an individual. Yes, I cannot put hundreds of hours every week into every gas game out there. But the question is does it grow the overall game? People who are playing these games, do these games invite people back in to playing games, or does it have somebody start playing a game where they weren't, playing a game as a service game yet? And there will be cannibalism from game to game, but if they're able to grow the overall like player base that's interested in, then you as a player, I think, have more choice and more direction. Especially if you get frustrated with your game and you're like, oh, there's not another good game, online RPG out there. Oh, actually, yes, there are, and there's communities that are willing to sustain those. But yeah, Chris, what do you got planned with the rest of the day?
I'd like to knock out the monthly task for World of Warcraft at some point, and Vampire Survivors is oddly satisfying.
Oh yeah, I love it, dude. I love this art. I love like that classic art style too. It kind of makes it exciting. So I'm gonna have to go and play it myself. Maybe hopefully sometime this week. We'll see. All right, guys, I'm gonna hit end broadcast, and it will send you on the way. I actually have my comedy set that I did the last comedy show I did, Better Than Hitler. If you guys want to go watch that, that's over on Gingerbread Comedy. I'll end broadcast. It might redirect you to that. I don't know. If you're on the YouTube side of things, otherwise you can go hang out with Chris while he tries to survive all the vampires that are running around out there in the world. So, all right, guys, thanks so much for being back. We'll see you guys tomorrow for our next live show, and we'll also get these clipped up for y'all. as well, whether you want to hang out with us live or not. We appreciate you guys. Love y'all, and I'm waving.